No.
You've only done this 30 times.
I know.
But this is the biggest crowd we've had almost.
Yeah, almost. Well, hey, welcome to the Calvary Chapel Salmon podcast. Thank you for joining with us today. Hagen, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Jordan. How are you?
Good. I think this is going to be a great podcast because the podcast viewers, and if you're listening, I'm sorry, but the viewers will be able to look at both of us at the same time.
They very rarely get to see us both together in
Wow.
the same shot. Yeah.
Maybe they were thinking we're actually just the same person.
They've never. Yeah, that happens sometimes.
They've never seen us together
but
in the
now
same room.
That's been debunked.
Debunked.
Yes.
But Hagen, it's not just us here today, is it?
Yeah, the reason why we're sitting so close together is not just because I missed you, because you've been in Salt Lake for 2.5 days. It's also because we actually have a special guest today. And the best part about this is I know nothing about him. You know as much as I know about him.
Yeah.
So we're all just going to learn together.
For sure. Yeah. Here he is over here. I guess we'll pan over when we say that.
There
but
you go.
His name's Joe. What's your last name, Joe?
Hurless.
Joe Hurless. And you just came into Salmon when?
I pulled in about 5 days ago.
5 days ago. Okay.
Wow.
Cool. And so tell us a little bit about yourself. What you doing? What you doing in Salmon?
So I kind of just travel around at this point in my RV, jumping from church to church, hoping to spread the love of God and see if there's any good that I can do in any of these communities, any volunteer work, anything like that, stuff like this where I can share my story and spread Jesus to people.
Cool. The last place you were at was Chalice, right? The Living Waters camp.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I just left Chalice. Met a whole bunch of really cool people there. I was actually, I was led to a church there by a employee at a Family Dollar store, and ended up going for their church service on Sunday. Met the pastor. He had a couple friends there. They invited me out to stay at a local ranch called Living Waters Ranch. It's owned and run by a guy named Christopher James, who goes to that church, and it's kind of like a Christian retreat for youth groups, and I guess they could do weddings and family reunions and stuff like that. But it's this massive 700-acre property where they've got cabins and they've got bunk houses and they've got cool stuff to do. And it's really beautiful. They invited me to stay out there for pretty much as long as I wanted. So.
Oh, wow.
I went out there and they set me up and just hung out with them and volunteered for a little while and made some great friends. It was a wonderful experience.
Cool. Nice.
So where's home?
Home is Boise, Idaho.
Oh, okay. Nice. So kind of born and raised there or moved there later on or?
Born and raised there. Yep.
Wow.
I'm an Idaho native.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
You're not one of those crazy people from other places.
Yeah, like Philadelphia,
yeah,
or even North Carolina. Those people are the worst.
California or anything.
Yeah. Hey, people from California are pretty cool.
They are.
Yeah.
They're great.
Some of them, yeah.
Some of
The
them,
ones that
yeah.
leave.
So,
Kidding.
the ones that leave. Roast it. So Joe, you haven't been saved for very long. Kind of had a cool radical testimony. Something kind of we want to maybe talk about today.
Yeah. So, well, it's kind of a long story.
Okay.
Well,
shoring it up. We ain't got much time. No, I'm
Okay.
kidding.
We have all the time in the world.
Yeah. No.
But lunch is soon and I'm hungry.
Well, I guess what I should start with is I'm the son of a mechanic, and
Okay.
I've worn many different hats in my life, but eventually became a mechanic. And in becoming a mechanic, I found myself in mechanic school in California. I got picked up into a fairly prestigious BMW program where they bring you in, they pay all your expenses, and then they train you. It was really kind of cool. And so you come out of there with master BMW credentials, and with those, I ended up moving back to Boise and joining the family business with my father, who's been a BMW mechanic my whole life. Okay. And a very successful one. Shout out to Hurless Brothers. He just sold the business, but they're still there, turning wrenches. So
that's awesome.
The idea was originally for me to take over this business, and it wasn't really going very well. My uncle was one of the owners. My dad is one of the owners. My sister was the bookkeeper, and I was the head mechanic. There's a lot of family going on in there.
Does not sound fun.
It's difficult. Yeah.
Makes Thanksgiving dinner maybe a little awkward.
Yeah, or not at all.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Because everybody's mad at each other.
Oh man.
So couldn't really get reconciled with my uncle. He wasn't happy with the job my sister was doing. He and I didn't see eye to eye. Just couldn't figure out a way to get his half of the business bought from him into my hands. So I became really depressed for a long time, and I had spent many years of my life before this drinking every day, and this led to kind of a pretty deep depression where I just kind of gave up on the business. This was right around the time that COVID hit, so my house, I mean, what happened in Idaho, a lot of like what happened everywhere else, the housing prices, the values of homes just went through the roof.
Yeah.
So I decided to, you know what, I'm just going to capitalize on this. Sold my house for double what I paid for it, and moved up to Post Falls, where I had a friend who had just finished his residency in Florida, became a doctor, was hired on to be the other half of a practice in Post Falls. So I was like, that'd be a great place to go. I mean, be right next to my best friend. I have another friend that lives in Spokane that I grew up with. This will be a great place to live. So I moved up there and spent 2 years sitting by myself drinking. And drinking had been a really big problem for me for a long time. There was about a 20-year span of my life where I didn't go one day without drinking. Yeah, I was a complete slave to it. It was this, I don't think either of you guys have ever been an alcoholic, but I'm sure you've talked to several.
Sure.
It was a situation where you wake up in the morning sick, and then you spend the rest of the day just getting through the day so that you can start drinking again. And once I had all the money in the world to be able to just sit on my butt, it just turned into more and more drinking. You know, so anyway, I was in Post Falls about 2 years after getting there, and I was sitting on the couch one night, and I was drinking. It was about 8:30 at night, and I think I had about 9 beers by that point, and usually by then you start feeling better. You know, it's like the sickness is going away, and the euphoria is coming in, the cloud that takes the pain away, and it wasn't working. You know, I wasn't starting to feel any better. So, and I had also eaten a weed gummy, marijuana gummy. That's kind of a big thing up there, and that wasn't working. Nothing was working, and I just kind of had this moment where I realized that there's no joy left in the world for me. Like, what am I living for? I'm just sitting here. I mean, what am I gonna do?
Yeah.
I mean, this utter moment of absolute despair, and I just kind of grabbed the blanket on the couch next to me, threw it over my head, and put my head in my hands, and started weeping because I was ready to die. And about a minute later, the phone rang. And my phone never rang back then, ever, because I was so isolated from everybody. I wasn't even hardly spending any time with my friends that I'd moved up there to spend time with. And I reach over and I grab the phone and I look at it, and it says Church of Jesus Christ on the caller ID.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah.
So I mean, the first thought that came to my head was, you know, what kind of self-righteous Mormon thinks that he can call me at 8:30 at night on a Wednesday, you know? So I ignored it and just kind of threw it off to the side, went back to my self-pity. And then 2 minutes later, it rang again. Same thing, Church of Jesus Christ. And I was like, wait a minute. That's not the Mormons calling. That's God calling. I mean, it was just this light bulb went off in my head. And so I got up from the couch and went to my bedroom and knelt down next to my bed and started praying. First time I've prayed ever. I grew up with no Christian religion, no religion whatsoever. Never went to church, was never asked to go to church, and sat there and prayed and went to bed. woke up the next day and everything started changing.
Huh.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was, I got up and I got up and I started cleaning, started cleaning my house. And as I'm putting some stuff away, I open up a drawer, and in the drawer I find a book that I bought about a year prior. And I bought it on the recommendation of a friend of mine who'd been going through divorce. And, I was talking with him, like, how you doing? He's like, well, I've got this book that's really helping me out. And I'm like, oh yeah, what's that all about? He's like, oh, it's called Wild at Heart by John Eldridge. And you guys are nodding.
Have you heard that book? I have. Yeah.
Yeah. We have somebody in our church who loves that book and wants me to read it.
Yeah.
And I flirted with the idea before.
You should.
But now I should read it. Yes.
Absolutely,
yes.
absolutely. It's a book. He didn't tell me it had anything to do with religion in any way. He told he said it's a book about reclaiming your masculinity, and it has a lot to do with fathers and the things that we go through when we're growing up that that hurt us, and it's about healing your heart. I'm like, wow, that sounds really good. And so I picked up this book out of the drawer, and I was like, well, maybe I'll read this. And so I sat down and I started reading it, and it was like, oh my gosh, this book was written for me.
Huh.
I mean, it was written directly to me, and I just couldn't put it down. And it was so relevant because I had just learned to pray the night before, and here is this amazing book, telling me all these different ways to heal my heart with the love of God. And I'm like, and so, I mean, that led to starting goals, to improving my life. I changed the way I eat. I changed the way that I spend my time, the way I talk to people. I mean, God got to work on me real quick and with a vengeance. And I transformed every single area of my life. Within about a year, I had lost 60 pounds and was alcohol free. And that's kind of a whole nother thing that we can get into if you want, and of how God healed me from alcohol. But yeah, it's been pretty amazing. And so I kind of hit a point where in August of last year I started running. This was at this point I'd lost about maybe 30-40 pounds and was starting to feel good, and it's like, I want to try doing something new. So I started running. And I never, did the thing where you put the earbuds in when you're running around and listen to music.
Yeah.
I always use that time to talk to God. And so one morning I'm running and I'm talking to God. And I'm like, God, this is going really, really well, but I can't sit in this apartment, working out and eating steaks for the rest of my life. What's next?
Yeah.
And so he started leading me down this path, and putting these desires in me to go on adventures and get out on the road. And so yeah, ended up kind of, and we can get into that too if you'd like.
At this point, where you kind of connected with a group of Christians, like how you kind of, because like you went from nothing to being saved radically, which is cool. But did you like get plugged in somewhere as far as a church, or?
I did. I did. So after I finished the book, I was like. I've got to call this friend of mine, and his name is Ryan, and I was like, I got to call Ryan. We got to go out to lunch. I got to tell him about this. And so we went out to lunch, and I'm sitting there and I'm telling him everything that I'm telling you, and I read the book, and it's had this crazy effect on me. And he's like, this is amazing. He's like, you've got to come to my church. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
And so so I went to his church, and it was a nice church in Spokane Valley. It's called One, a really good church, and I had actually gone to a smaller I can't remember what it was called, but it was like a friend's church. It was like a really small church in Post Falls, and that was the first service that I had ever voluntarily as a man or child just walked into and sat down at, and it was nice. It was pretty, but I mean, it wasn't, I didn't feel God there, So when I went to this church with my friend Ryan, it was completely different. It was like a rock concert, you know, and I mean, all of, you know, so much going on and so many people raising their hands in the air, and the music was so beautiful. I mean, I really, really felt it there. And so that was kind of,
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. And so have you gone back to that church, or do you have a kind of like a home-based church now that you would call your home, or?
Yeah. So what happened? So I was going to that church with him for a few months, and then that led me to looking into more and more. You know, they streamed their stuff online, so a lot of the time I would go online, and you know, if I couldn't make it to church on Sunday, I'd watch theirs. And then, you know, YouTube rabbit hole, you know, leads you to other things, you know. And I came across
YouTube knows what you want.
It
They'll
does.
give you what you want.
Yeah, they got algorithms. I don't know how they do it, but they do it.
Yeah.
I came across in the rabbit hole. I came across a sermon by Jim Putman, who is the lead pastor of Real Life Church in Post Falls, which just happened to be like 4 blocks away from my apartment. And it was just this. It was this really. The service just really got to me. I mean, I was like, this guy is good. You know, I mean, he, you know, one of the things that Real Life kind of prides themselves on is they interpret the Bible, or they teach the Bible the way that it would be interpreted at the time that it was written. And I found that to be really refreshing. So I started kind of feeling this pull towards Real Life. And so for a while there, I was actually going to both churches.
Yeah.
And then, you
Double dipping.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, it was a 9 o'clock service at 1 in Spokane Valley, and then over to the 11:45 at Real Life. But you know, that became, as the winter rolled in, that became kind of unmanageable. You know, I've got a little pickup truck, but the one in Spokane Valley was about 30 miles away, and on really, really snowy, busy roads, that wasn't really working. So I decided to just start going to Real Life. But you know, there was there's this thing with this pull that's happened ever since I started praying. You know, it's like I start feeling compelled in a direction, like there's something that's not just me driving me to go do something. Every single time I follow it, it leads to amazing things.
Yeah. Huh. That's awesome.
Wow.
So that led me to Real Life, and Real Life really, it's a really good church, massive church, but you know, beautiful services, beautiful music. I got the idea to start volunteering by kind of falling into a volunteer position with them. They have like a campus in Post Falls, and attached to this campus is they have a what would you call it, a food bank, and then next to the food bank they have a thrift store that they run also. And I liked shopping at the thrift store. I was on this quest for a while to go, or to collect all of the DVDs of the movies from when I was a kid that I liked.
Okay.
You know, so I would go to this thrift store, you know, once or twice a week, and just kind of fell into a volunteer opportunity there, and found out that I really, really enjoyed doing it.
That's cool. And so from that, you at some point felt like God was calling you to buy an RV and hit the road, and
Yeah. So yeah. I asked God what was next, and so He started kind of putting these desires in me through my parents. Actually, my parents. I was visiting for Thanksgiving, and my parents were looking to buy a new RV themselves. When my dad retired and sold the business, he was worried that my mom was just going to go nuts having him there, because he'd been working so much for the last 30 years, and so he bought them a Travato, which is a little Winnebago. It's kind of like a Sprinter van, and to get them out on some adventures, thinking, maybe this is what they'll do with their retirement. Well, they really, really took to it. They loved it. Loved going out on the road, loved meeting the people and stuff like that. So they were looking to upgrade, because my niece is getting to the age where she can start going with them. And so while I was in town, their dad and I are going out to we're going out to Bish's RV and Camping World, and looking online, shopping just constantly for these RVs. I mean, and because it was exciting, they're really excited about this, and these RVs are so cool, I couldn't stop looking at them, and so I started, these desires started developing in me, and so I just kind of kept pursuing it and kept praying on it, and God just kind of kept pushing me in that direction, and so it was like every time I was like, are you sure about this? He was like, yeah, I'm sure about it.
Mm-hmm. And how do your parents kind of feel about, because obviously they're not, or we're not Christians, and so how, and now you're kind of pretty radical, some would say, just kind of traveling around and showing up to random churches and helping people out. So how do they kind of, what was their reaction?
0 to 60 pretty fast there.
Yeah.
They have been very supportive. I was really, when I first came up with this idea to start traveling around on the road, I was very quiet about it. Just kind of throwing out little seeds here and there, and just kind of picking their brain on stuff like that, because my mom is very protective, as mothers can be.
Sure.
And they're constantly saying, what are you going to do for work? What are you going to do for work? And that kind of stuff. And I'm honestly, at this point, I'm just like, God will provide.
Yeah.
So I was I tiptoed into it with them. And when I went back to Post Falls after leaving them for Thanksgiving, I spent like hours a day, researching RVs and, all this kind of stuff. And I just like I say, I just kind of tiptoed into it. And then one day when I was there for Christmas, I go, so what would you think if I just, up and hit the road? And I couldn't believe it. She goes, one of my favorite times of my life was when I was traveling around for work all the time. And I'm like, what? She's like, I mean, she was being supportive of it. And then Dad was being supportive of it. And so I'm telling my friends about it, and I'm thinking they're all going to think I'm crazy. And they're all supportive of it. I mean, it was just this, it was this outpouring of support that I absolutely was. I mean, I was terrified that everybody was just going to totally shoot me down on this, and everybody was just totally excited about it.
Yeah.
So,
Huh.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you get, lack of a better term, like confirmation, validation. You get a motorhome, and you just I guess I'm going to start driving on the interstate and just pull over when I'm tired, or.
Well, the first thing to do, so this whole thing's kind of a process, it's like, so how am I going to do this? First of all, I mean, what am I going to buy? So am I going to buy something to tow behind my little pickup, or am I going to get something self-contained? Well, if I get something self-contained with an engine in it, what am I going to do if I need to go get some bread from Walmart or something like that? And it was like, oh, I could get a motorcycle. And so the whole the motorcycle was sort of the genesis of the whole thing, because that led me to thinking, okay, so if I'm going to get a motorcycle, I have to get something light that can be carried on the back end of an RV. That leads to research. And so as I was researching, I found out about these different kinds of motorcycles. There's a really, really light one that weighs about 420 pounds wet called a Honda Rebel 500. And it is so cool. It is just so cool. I mean, I found this thing and I was like, I don't even care if I buy an RV. I have to have this thing. It is just awesome.
That's good.
And the funny thing is I used to ride motorcycles a lot, 10, 15 years ago, until I was sick every day. It was like there, and that was one of the things that started happening as after God saved me and I started transforming, as I started doing things that I used to like doing again, because I wasn't sick every day anymore. And so it was like, I used to really love riding motorcycles, and I found this one, and they weren't very expensive, and they're not really fast, but they're really cool looking, and they can do whatever you need a motorcycle to do. And I was like, I have to have this thing. So I'm like, okay, God, here's what's going to happen. I mean, not like that, but but God, I'm going to pursue this motorcycle thing, and I'll see how that goes. If this process goes smoothly, and it seems like it was, and I feel like it was meant to be, then I feel like we're on the right track here.
Yeah.
So I started researching it, and I found one in Moscow, Idaho, just 60 miles south of me.
Mm-hmm.
Went down and met the gal, and it's a beautiful motorcycle. She had bought it off of a guy for way too much, basically MSRP, and she was paying to store it because she had put 40 miles on it and was terrified of it.
Yeah.
And and she had financed it through her credit union. So I get down there and I check it out and I go for a little ride on it. I think this was in December.
Oh, wow.
And I forgot to take gloves with me.
Uh-huh.
It was cold. So I rode it for 2 miles and then I was like, okay, that's enough.
Yeah.
I'm good. And so I made her an offer on it, and she accepted the offer. It was quite a bit lower than what she owed on it, but it was this situation where this motorcycle was totally eating her lunch. I mean, she was getting so beat up by it. She was paying minimum payments on this thing. She was paying to store it. She wasn't using it because she was afraid of it. I mean, she was really getting beat up by this thing. So I got a smoking deal on a motorcycle. We went down to the credit union. I paid them my portion of it. She paid the rest off. She got out of it free and clear.
Cool.
No more payments on it. No more storing on it. And then just the whole process of getting it back. I mean, everything went really smoothly. Everybody came out roses on the deal. And so I was like, okay, cool. That went pretty darn well. I think we're on the right track here. And so I kept shopping for an RV. It had to have certain things in it. You know, I had to have, you know, enough. Had to have enough floor space in it to where if it was raining outside, that I could work out inside of it, because that's just become part of who I am through this transformation. And anyway, I was on Facebook Marketplace, and I came across this posting, and I can't even really remember how I found it, because it wasn't listed under like traditional vehicles, you know, but I found this RV that was about 300 miles away in a place called Dayton, Oregon. And it was just exactly what I was looking for, and it was in my price range. And so I called up to ask some questions about it, and the guy on the other end of the phone was really, really nice, answered tons. We were on the phone for probably 45 minutes before we got anywhere. But so he's answering all my questions for me, and how's the paint? How's this? How's that? Looks good. I kind of need some help here. I could use this there. And I'm like, okay, Ron, this sounds pretty good. Let me kind of tell you where I'm coming from. And I told him what I told you, story about being saved. And my plan with it, it's like, Ron, I'm kind of feeling like God is sort of pushing me in this direction to buy an RV like this and go out on the road and see if I can help people, because God has done so much for me. I mean, I feel like I should be out there doing something for him. And he goes, wow. And I told him the whole thing, all the alcohol and everything. And he goes, man, that's an amazing story. He goes, I became a pastor this year. I'm like, what?
Huh.
He's like, yeah, I became the pastor for my church this year. I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. And he goes, I got to tell you that somebody in your situation, we're going to be able to be pretty flexible on the price. And I'm like, okay, I'll rent a car. I'll come down and see it. And so the next day we actually did a video walkthrough, and a little bit more detail on it, and found that it needed tires, and the generator didn't work because it's never been used, so it probably needed a carburetor and stuff like that. So I'm kind of doing some math in my head, and what am I going to offer this guy and stuff. So anyway, a couple weeks later, I get down there in the rental car, and I pull up. Really nice property. Dayton's kind of like a farming community type of thing. He had this nice acreage property, and get out there, and he's got the RV kind of lifted up on the jacks, all the wheels off the ground. He's got it all cleaned up. It looks really cool. And I get out of my car and I shake his hand, and the first thing I notice is the tires. They're all shiny. I'm like, man, you even shined up the tires. He's like, no, like they're new tires. I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, they're new. I'm like, you put 4 new tires on this thing? He's like, no, I put 6 new tires on this thing. I'm like, why? Because we had found that it needed 4 tires, not 6. But anyway, I'm like, why? He goes, because I knew that if you were going to buy this thing, you were going to be driving it 350 miles back to Post Falls, and I wanted it to be safe. Like, you've got to be kidding me. And he goes, and the other thing is I'm not going to factor this into the price of the negotiation because it needed tires anyway. I'm like, that's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, I mean, all this goodwill just being built up. I mean, it's just amazing and stuff. And so he brought his parents over. It's his parents' RV. They're getting too old, they're way too old to drive at this point, And so I meet them, and then him and I go for a drive, and I pull back into his property and throw it in a park, and at about this point, the weight of what I was doing landed on top of me, like all at once. You know that feeling like when you're sitting in a high school class and the teacher says that there's a pop quiz coming up that you didn't study for, like that feeling like of utter, like, oh my gosh. It landed on me all at once, and I was like, Ron, I need just a minute here, because I'm about to spend all of my money on this RV and upend my life and go out on the road, And so he's like, of course, take your time. And so, he leaves the RV, and I sit down, and I'm just kind of sitting on one of the chairs facing the kitchen, and I just put my head down and I'm praying. I'm like, God, are you sure? Are you sure about this? This seems kind of crazy to me. And, I've been reading a lot of books by then. You read one John Eldridge book, you want to read all of them. And so I knew that I was having a bit of a crisis of faith at that point. And I'm like, and I shouldn't have been. I mean, I was at a pastor's house to buy an RV. I mean, like, after asking God for, directions on this, but I'm like, I just had to ask him one more time. Are you sure about this? Are you sure? And so I'm sitting there praying. And a few minutes later, I lift my head up and I open my eyes, and I'm just staring at the kitchen, But it was this feeling of comfort and this feeling of familiarity that came over me. It was like, yeah, I could live in this. I could do this. And so I was like, okay, you got it. And so I got up and I had Ron come back in, and we negotiated a price, a really, really, really good price. And, he was so good to me. It was amazing. The whole thing was amazing. And so I bought the RV and drove it back to Post Falls, and I actually drove it back that night. The crazy thing was I left his house at about 5:00. To get to Post Falls from Dayton, you have to drive through Portland. So my trial by fire in this RV was to drive through Portland during rush hour traffic.
Sure.
In this gigantic thing. The thing's, it's 30 feet long. And so I drove through Portland during rush hour traffic in this thing as like my first drive. But anyway, I got back and I drove all through the night until I got to Post Falls. I got to Post Falls at about 2:00 and 2 in the morning, and parked it on the side of the road, and went up to my room and sat down next to my bed to pray before I went to bed. And I just said, God, I hope you were sure about this. Did I do the right thing? Did I do the right thing? And at that moment, I felt a hand on my left shoulder just give me a little squeeze. And I was like, okay. And so I went to bed, and that was it.
Huh.
Wow. That's super cool. Man, so now you just get to go around, like you said in the beginning, just spread the love of God and tell people about Jesus when you see him, and serve and help out. And
pretty much, yeah. I mean, a big part of what I try to, of the people that I try to find, are people that are in pain the way that I was. Because alcohol really, really can control your life. I mean, it controlled over half of my life. And I've spoken so the way that I quit alcohol was I didn't go to AA or anything like that. You know, part of my and that's not to say anything bad about AA by any means. But part of my transformation and part of what led me to be able to transform so quickly was that I was inspired to start a goal sheet. And the goal sheet was, you know, every page was a week's worth of goals, you know, and there's a box for every day to check off for every single goal. And, you know, the top of my log was alcohol goals. And so I started out, you know, at like no more than 6 beers a day. I mean, 6 beers a day. Come on. So, but that you got to start somewhere. So that's where it started. No more than 6 beers a day. And then the second line down from there was workout goals. And that started out at workout once this week, you know. And then the bottom area was social goals. And that would be like, you know, getting outside and doing something, reading a book, taking your dog for a walk, you know, that kind of stuff. And so as the weeks went by, the alcohol goals slowly ratcheted down. And then the workout goals and the social goals slowly ratcheted up. And I had hit a point in September where I was down to, I think the alcohol goal was down to about a beer and a half a day. And I was kind of at the point where I think that's probably as low as I'll go. You know, I don't think I'll ever stop drinking.
Sure.
I just love drinking. You know, I love beer. I'll always, you know, have a beer with dinner. You know, you make these agreements in your head. And one of the big ones that I had made was that I needed alcohol to sleep. And so anyway, there was just one day, September 26th, that I finished making my dinner and I sat down to eat and said my before meal prayers. And I looked over and I didn't have a beer sitting in front of me. And I just went, whoa, God, is this the day? Is this going to be the first day in 20 years that I don't drink a beer? And then I didn't. And I knelt by my bed that night doing my nightly prayers. And I said, God, I think this is going to be the first day that I make it through without drinking one beer. Can you please bring me peaceful sleep and show me that I can live this life without it? And went to bed, woke up the next day, and haven't drank since. I mean, and it's not even this thing where I feel like I'm depriving myself of anything. It's just God just took it away.
That's cool.
The desire for alcohol is gone. I don't know what that did on the microphone, but
No, sure, it sounded cool.
But
Wow.
yeah, no, I mean, like, the desire is gone. And you know, people ask me, you know, so what, you know, what do you do when your friends invite you out to the bar? I'm like, I go out to the bar. I mean, I could even probably have a beer at the bar if I wanted to. But they go, I can't believe you can do that. I mean, I can't even be around alcohol, or I just want it so bad I can't even stand it. I'm like, God just took the desire out of my heart. It's gone. I don't even think about it.
That's cool.
And so I want people to know that he can do that for you. I mean, I don't think people have any idea just how powerful he is.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, so going out on the road, I want to share that with people. I want the whole world to be healed from alcohol, because it is a thief, and it brings shame, and it brings guilt, and it brings illness. I mean, a lot of people out there can enjoy it responsibly. I wasn't one of them, and it controlled my life. And so I want so part of this mission is to help people with that if I can.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I mean, I am walking, talking, living, breathing proof that God exists and that he loves us. And if I can spread his glory to others and help others come to him, I don't care about any money. I don't want any money. I don't have any money. My money is God's money. I just want the whole world to be healed the way I was healed. I wish everybody could have an experience that I did, you know?
Yeah, and that experience is so cool. Like you got called by Mormons. Mormons were cold calling you,
Yeah.
and you just never gone to a church, never heard a sermon, never whatever, and you were like, "Oh, God's calling me,"
Yep.
and that's wild.
Well, the
That's
phone-
so cool.
It said Jesus Christ. Right
Yeah,
on
well,
the
hey,
phone.
yeah, 'cause it did, yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
That is crazy.
And they actually called a couple months later, and I answered this time,
Oh, okay.
and I told them the whole story,
Mm.
and they're like, that's crazy. You didn't answer the phone. I'm like, no, and they're like, well, it probably wasn't us on the other end anyway.
Yeah. Huh. That's cool. So you still have a place in Post Falls or no? You just have the RV and you're driving.
So yeah, no, I left the apartment in Post Falls. I went down. My parents live in Boise.
Mhm.
They have a house there. So I lived with them for a couple weeks while I finished getting the RV ready.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're kind of my in between place.
Sure.
So I go there for a couple weeks and spend some time with them, and then when it's time to hit the road again, I take off and hit the road.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's cool.
this is actually I'm actually about a month and a half into my second trip. My first trip took place in June, and that was sort of the testing the waters. The seeing if this was something that I could actually do. I've got the RV, I've got it all outfitted. And I did a ton of stuff to this thing. I replaced all the lighting, dyed the carpets, put a solar setup on it so that I could be, out, in the middle of nowhere if I needed to be. But it was, I needed to put this thing through its paces and and learn how to use it and stuff. So, I did a loop that started in Boise and went down to Twin Falls. And then from Twin Falls, I went down to Wells, Nevada, over to Elko, and then back up Highway 51 to there's a reservoir there. I think it's called Wild Horse Reservoir. And then up to Bruno, which is just south of Boise, and then back up to Boise. So it was just kind of this big loop, and it took about a month and a half. And the plan on this trip was for it to be just me and my dog and God. I wanted it to just be, I wasn't planning on interacting with a bunch of people. I wanted to spend some time alone out in this RV and on some adventures with God. And the other part of this, the other goal of this trip was to read the Bible in its entirety during that trip. And I did. I finished it 2 days early while I was in Bruno at the best spot that I had found the entire trip, right next to a lake, and it was just glorious. I mean, it was an amazing feeling to finish the Bible. And the funny thing about that trip was, despite my best efforts to be isolated and alone with God the whole time, I just kept getting thrown into these relationships and these experiences. I met some of the greatest people. I met this amazing couple named Wayne and Carol that turned me on to all of these apps for finding campsites all over the place. Little secret apps. They gave me advice. They took me from this terrified green, newbie in RVs, and they kind of tempered me into, like, not a pro, but I mean, they really helped me kind of get my feet underneath me with the whole RV thing. And so that trip went so well, and I met so many good people that it was just I got back to Boise and it was like, yeah, I'm gonna keep going. And then spent 2 weeks with my parents, and then headed up towards this way. And yeah, you guys kind of know the rest.
Wow.
Yeah.
Ended up in Chalice and Living Waters, and now here with you guys on the recommendation of Christopher James, the owner of Living Waters. He specifically told me to come to you, Hagen, and meet you at this church.
That's cool.
Wow.
Right on.
That is such a cool story. Man. Well, you have any closing questions for him, Hagen? Anything you can think of? Because I'm a little hungry.
I just think it's cool, and like the whole heart of your life right now is just to proclaim to people that Jesus is real. He can touch you. He can meet you where you're at, and you don't have to stay where you're at. Like 2 years ago, if someone told you what you're telling us, you would think, no way. Like, there's no way I would be this guy.
No.
But that's what our God does. He takes people just like you. He takes a 16-year-old Mormon kid like myself. He takes some weird homeschooled inner Philadelphia raised boy like Jordan, and he uses us. And it's just cool to see that. He calls us out. He taps us on the shoulder. He reveals himself to us in the way that we need it. And we respond to that. And he's got a plan and a purpose for our lives. So it's just cool to remind people, for maybe not even themselves, but maybe you have a kid or a grandkid or a neighbor or a brother. You're thinking there's no way this kid could ever get serious about Jesus. Never say never.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Because it could happen in an instant. And that's the coolest thing about your story. Just like one day you didn't care, didn't know anything. The next day, God just boom.
And that was one of the greatest things about God is that you, when you follow him, you start having these situations where I never thought I could, I never thought I would have been here, over and over and over again. I mean, I have them every day. I'm riding out here, I'm 10 miles out of town right now. I'm riding here on my motorcycle this morning. And as I'm riding here, I'm thinking, oh my goodness. I mean, look what I'm doing. I mean, if I could I have even imagined a year ago that I would be riding through this beautiful valley, through this mountain area to this little town to go meet these two great guys to have this conversation. I mean, it's just every day is like all of these gifts come in, and there are gifts in every single day, and that's so many people don't see them because it's so easy to take them for granted, and we try and fill our hearts and our lives with so many things. I think it was Pascal that said that every man is born with a God-sized hole inside of him, and they try and fill it with all kinds of different things, and nothing ever satisfies. But like when you fill it with God, you start to see the little gifts everywhere, every little thing, and you become so grateful, and you want to share it with everybody else. And I think that's what this whole mission is all about for all of us. Is once we know, we want everybody to know. And Oswald Chambers said that you can't give somebody else what you have found, but you can cause them to have a desire for it. So, if I can't go around handing my experience and handing what I have to everybody else, I'm sure as heck going to go around planting those seeds in as many places as I can.
Yeah. You can't feed them, but you can make them hungry.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, at least 10 of the people that listen to this podcast will be encouraged.
Yeah, for sure. No, there's more than 10 people.
Yeah, maybe a few hundred, but
Come on. So modest, Hagen. But yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing. And literally, we just met you last night, and it's so cool how it all worked out. And yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be super encouraged by this. And
thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah, and if you live in Salmon and you see this guy riding his motorcycle, or say hi. He's not scary. He's not a weirdo. So he's a nice guy.
But
so
if you live in Salmon and you see some guy taking random pictures, watch out for him.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That'll make more sense next podcast.
Yes, I will. Okay, well, stay tuned for that.
No, he's really nice too, though.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for tuning in with us today. Have a good one. Bye-bye.